crime stuff.
Oops.
You might be live.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. Are we live?
Yes. But I'm drinking. That's what I went with.
I got some of those. This is going to be my, well, whenever my husband actually brings the mixed drink in, Steve made for me, it's going to be my first drink since getting pregnant.
Yeah.
My first hard alcohol drink since being pregnant. So
that is why I'm not going to be drinking that one, because I would be like,
on the floor.
hard alcohol one, it would be you two on your own.
Okay, there he is.
All right.
Our host of the most.
What's up, people? How are you doing? Welcome to the Royale Political Wires. Yes, let's raise a glass quickly to having something of a bar room atmosphere here online. It's the Royale Political Wire mayoral close-ups. Well, cheers to everybody. Welcome to the cheers to Maureen. Cheers to Rebecca. And cheers to Mike. Yes. Everybody's got a drink delivered to them.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was very exciting.
That was impressive, Steve. Yes.
I know.
In the snow. In the snow, no less.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
it's the first time I've actually had a saloon owner bring me a drink to my house.
Hopefully it won't be the last. I kind of am enjoying doing my duty as making sure that people are not thirsty. So, and it's difficult in these pandemic times, but we're making it work. But it's good to see each one of you. Oh, I didn't get to see you, Rebecca. I had to park my car in the middle of the street, and I was backing up traffic. So,
yeah, I was upstairs anyway. But I told Mark, I was like, we're getting a package, and I think you're going to be very excited about this package. And Mark is actually drinking the hard drink. I'm sorry, because he's like.
I didn't realize that Mark would have been there. I would have brought one for him too. But next time out, I will make sure that you guys both get properly watered.
Thanks. I think he's doing pretty good down there.
It's been pretty fun trying to figure out to make this place work during the pandemic. We're probably going to start back up again in mid-March at some point. And I know I've gotten to see most of you guys. Well, not actually most of you guys. I got to see Judge here at the bar during the time outside. We'll be reintroducing some of this fun back in the spring, and hopefully we'll all start getting our shots soon so we can really rub shoulders at the bar and drink with proper gusto. So I see Bill here is still working on getting everybody working over here. He's there's always some sort of technical issues with these things, but it's to be expected. I think everybody's grown accustomed to Zoom and streaming technicalities. But
so we're live.
I got to say, I'm curious to have you guys' thoughts. I mean, this is a very different type of campaign season for sure. I mean, usually on a mayoral local level, we are all literally seeing the people that we are, that are running for mayor. But this is the first time it's happening on screens, I guess. I mean, are we actually seeing people? Actually, we're lucky enough. Cara is actually on site here. She wanted to come down, so actually finally
nice.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, we were saying it's for Cara. It's her first citywide election. Plus, it's a pandemic. Plus, it's the new runoff, or not runoff, but the new system.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, I've heard different terms for it. Different types of, like I heard jungle primary. I've heard.
Was the word cluster in there someplace?
Yeah, definitely on the clusterfuck side of it. This is a tavern, so I can swear as much as I want.
This is a swearing friendly podcast.
My mother watches this and she's totally fine with it. I learned it by watching her. So it's I don't know. I mean, I like the idea of having something different, although I'm wildly I don't know if it's going to work well or not, but we'll find out. What are your guys' thoughts on this new primary system?
I think it'll be interesting to see if people get the idea that they need to vote again in April. Because
Yeah.
I think everybody's used to voting in the primary and then, show up if you want to, because the result is kind of foreordained. But now it's kind of real. And you got to get 50% of the voters voting for you in order to become mayor, as opposed to 30-some% if you've got a multi-way Democratic primary, like they still do in the county, in the backward place.
Yeah. County's been showing its ass, that's for sure.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see it. It seems as though from a casual yet involved viewer's standpoint, it seems as though each of the candidates has a different idea of who they're running against right now. And also it's a much narrower field, I'm assuming because of the signature requirement, which I like having a narrower field personally. So I think that makes it a little easier on us voters.
But by the way, can I make just a plug? It's the first time I've seen Rebecca since she went to work for the Missouri Independent.
Yay, thank you.
I know.
It's really great work you're doing. You have something in there several times a week almost, it seems like. And it's really terrific stuff.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you and your colleagues. Yeah.
Give us the pitch for Missouri Independent. Like, what
I
is?
would be happy to.
give us
I would be happy to.
give us the 2-minute pitch, or however long minute pitch.
Well, I mean, I think the model that drew me was I felt like I could still contribute to the St. Louis American, because the model is, only like some of the bigger papers can send a reporter out to Jefferson City to cover what's going on in the state. And some of that stuff is just so impactful for us. Like when I was at the American, I could never cover all of the bills that were going to be impacting St. Louis. And there's just so much on the crime level, like right now for the protesters, that you can run over a protester and you'll be fine. There's a lot of stuff going on right now that I couldn't watch carefully, So what we're doing is we're providing that coverage for free to any outlet that wants to print it. And it just came on, I think, at the exact right time, because there's so much going on with this vaccine rollout, that you just have to be really on top of it. And Tessa Weinberg, who's covering health, and Rudy Keller too, they've just been so instrumental, I think, in keeping that communication open, because a lot of these smaller newspapers throughout the state can use that coverage and just keep up to date, keep their residents up to date. So we launched in October, and so far we're a news nonprofit. So that's just kind of our model. If any outlet in the state or out of state, but I think it pertains to most people in state, can print our coverage. So and so we're 4 people. There's just 4 people. It's Jason Hancock, Rudy Keller, Tessa Weinberg, and myself, and it's an awesome team, I think.
You are an awesome team.
It's kind of an all-star lineup there.
And the governor has already denounced you, which is really
multiple times.
Congratulations.
Almost right out of the gate. That was terrific. You can't buy that kind of publicity.
Cheers.
Yeah, I know. A mark of pure pride is getting denounced by the governor. So.
Well,
the former sheriff of Bolivar, our good friend.
Well, speaking of people in reaching for higher positions, it sounds like we have our technical worked out, right? And I think we're going to go ahead. Nope, we're not. Okay. Well, hey, I don't mind having drinks and chatting with you guys. It's been a minute.
Do you want us to do our intros to buy you a couple minutes?
Yeah, do some intros. Maureen, let's start with you. You're the one that we need to hear from.
I think we need to hear from all of us. I'm not sure why it's just me.
Well, you brought it up. So.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking earlier how to do introductions. So we could do round robin where I introduce other people. So this is
go for it.
Well, then I don't actually know how that's going to work, but I'll do my own. I'm Maureen. I am, as previously described on this podcast, a local woman. That's most of my presence here.
Right up
I
there.
am.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm local, and I vote and I'm a homeowner, so I am interested in politics from that angle. I'm also a lawyer, so that's disappointing, I think, for all of us. And I have a little baby that everyone saw maybe for a minute. So, yeah, I am here in my personal capacity. And if we talk about anything where I may be involved in a lawsuit from a counsel perspective, I will be very silent. So if I stop talking for several minutes.
Rebecca and I will talk about it.
You'll talk about it. Okay, so then let's pass the mic to one Mike Wolf to introduce himself. The man, the legend, my former dean.
Yeah, I'm ex everything, and I'm the
one of your first cleanup jobs you were asked to do.
Yeah, well,
not the last.
No, but it lasted longer than the last one. Yeah, I was dean when Maureen was at St. Louis Law School, and before that I was on the Missouri Supreme Court. And now I'm failing my third or fourth retirement, depending on how you count. And so I'm just sort of the designated older guy.
Nice.
Now, Rebecca Rhodes, tell us. I'll toss it to you.
Well, I already made that big, long pitch, so I don't want to take the mic too much longer. But yeah, so I moved over to the Missouri Independent in October after spending 10 years at the St. Louis American. And so I'm still contributing to that through the Missouri Independent. We're still connected. But yeah, it'll be different for me to cover this race because I'm not going to be covering it like I would have previously. I think I might just bop in and out depending how things go. But so yeah, it's going to be an interesting campaign, the new structure of it. I'm personally excited of it because just as a resident, I think that's a great model. I think we've just been stuck in this way where it's, the primary and then that's it. There's just so much more tension. There's more racial tension when it's set up that way. So yeah, I'm excited for this as a voter myself. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
All right.
I think we should be pretty ready now, right, Bill, to bring in Cara. I might have to dip out depending on how this technical production goes. Bill, are we ready to rock? All right. Here comes Cara, who's running for mayor.
Hey, there she is.
From the other angle in the Royale. Is it a ghost town there, Cara? Or is Steve running some sort of COVID speakeasy full of?
It's pretty empty, and I have to say, I think I'm the cause of the technical difficulties, insisting that I come in person just because I haven't been to a bar in so long. I just had to be here in person.
That's your story, and you're sticking with it, right?
That's right.
I understand. Well, thank you for joining us on your undoubtedly 50th Zoom call of the day, if you're anything like the rest of us. But we appreciate that. So, okay, so give us, go ahead.
Well, this is my first StreamYard of the day, so we've got that.
I know, this is new territory for all of us here. So,
and this is my first official discussion about the mayor's race with a cocktail in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. I assume, I was going to say, so cheers. Cheers to you. Cheers to all of us. St. Louis's only bar-themed local politics podcast, I believe. Okay, so Cara, start us off.
I'm having difficulty hearing.
Can you hear me right now?
She is.
Well, if anybody wants to type in any questions, if they're seeing us streaming, I'm not exactly sure where we're streaming right now. I'm looking them up right now. Bill's over there. Go ahead and start posting.
Can you turn off your laptop?
Turn off my laptop.
Turn off my laptop.
No. Rebecca and Mike, can you still hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear us, Cara?
Let's just start making wild predictions while this is while everyone else is frozen. Cara just comes back on in the middle of us, just making outrageous bets.
The question is, can Cara Spencer hear us?
I can hand her my phone.
I definitely can.
Okay, she can.
Oh, you can hear us.
She can hear us, so we should start.
I thought you were paused this whole time.
Yeah. Who cares if we have an audience? We need that. We need to hear from you.
We do need to hear from you. All right, Cara, tell us, if you can hear me, why you and why now for mayor? Give us your pitch as to what motivated you to start now in the year of our Lord 2021, mid-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Why you for mayor of St. Louis?
Well, Maureen, you may know that I have been going at this for some time now. I announced my candidacy not in this year of the pandemic, but in the previous year of the pandemic. So, it was clear to me that we needed to take our city in a new direction. And that became, pretty clear to me on my first day down at the Board of Aldermen, to be frank with you. I mean, we've got some real structural issues here. And, I think it's time that we start thinking outside the box. We start thinking positively about our community and really become solution oriented. We've stagnated my entire lifetime as a broader St. Louis region, and it's time that we get serious about the real structural issues that are holding us back. And I bring a new perspective to the conversation with some real experience on the administrative side of city government, having served on the Board of Aldermen on the policymaking end of things. And I've gotten some serious things done. And I'd like to take my experience here on the neighborhood level citywide and helping to redevelop our city as a whole and reposition the St. Louis community for growth.
Who do you see as your constituencies that will make you successful in this contest? I mean, who do you think is the coalition that is going to propel you to victory? Uh-oh.
She's in. She's out. She's no longer here.
Not a coalition of the...
Do you want to turn that off?
It won't make any difference.
Shit.
Maybe hop on that. It's okay, you can cuss your Cara.
There you go.
Maybe hop on a, there we
He's
go.
moving now.
Maybe hop on Steve's phone.
Yeah, Steve's phone seemed great.
Yeah. It seemed like it was rolling.
By the end of this, we're just going to have nominated each other for mayor. So we got to interview someone who's running for mayor. So someone here is going to step up. So.
Yeah. So, Judge Wolf.
Yes, ma'am.
What were you doing most recently, and what changed with that position and that role so drastically?
Well, frankly, there are some short-term issues that you don't need a task force for. I mean, I figured that. I mean, it was kind of on the fly, and so if you want to think about longer-term issues, you got an election in the way. So let's wait till that done. Come back and get serious because that's a longer-term thing. So, Cara, are you back?
I never went anywhere, Judge.
I mean, can you hear us? And we can see you and we can
But
hear
I
you
can't.
now. So
I wouldn't miss
Rebecca
this for the world.
All right. Do we have a pending question with Rebecca? Were you going to ask?
Yeah.
her?
Did you hear my last question, Cara?
They answered, I'm sure.
Did you hear my last question, Cara?
Uh-oh.
Hello?
Nope. She didn't hear it. Oh, no. There we are. Are you on Steve's phone?
Okay, we're going to try this with my phone.
Okay.
Okay, what's your
It looks
question?
great with your phone.
Rebecca?
There we go.
Go ahead, Maureen.
We've really got you focused now, Cara.
I know.
Say that again,
Judge.
So
Yeah.
the pending question before the technical difficulty started was, who do you see as your core constituency? So who do you think are the coalition of victors that are going to propel you to victory in either March or April?
Well, I mean, I view my constituency as the city of St. Louis. I mean, we have to have a mayor who can unite the city. That's just paramount to our success and the future of our community. So we've been working across the city to build, to drive that conversation. I've gotten a lot of support here in South St. Louis, where we are here at the Royale. I was pleasantly surprised to see a lot of my signs here on Arsenal, but I mean, throughout the city, we've got some great ambassadors in every single neighborhood. We've done a few in-person events, one in North St. Louis last week, and we did one in South St. Louis a couple weeks ago. We're trying to keep those to a minimum, but, in order to really move our city forward, we've got to have a mayor who views the entire city of St. Louis as their constituency.
I mean, that's fair. But is there a specific coalition that you think you're going to be able to build that will bring you to electoral victory?
It's funny. I mean, when people talk about the Board of Aldermen, I've heard this said before, there's, the Progressive Caucus, the Conservative Caucus, the Black Caucus, and then there's me. And, I don't view myself as having, huge, necessarily catering to any specific group of folks. My message is one of hope, it's one of reform, and it's one of moving together united. And, folks across the city, it's resonating, and I'm grateful to hear that.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about your first ad. I think you could probably recite this better than I can, but it starts off, or at least one line in there says, "The Reed record, corruption, cronyism, and crime that's out of control." And in response to that ad, Lewis Reed responded in the St. Louis American that this is a sad old racist trope, blaming Black leaders for crime. Is that the response you expected?
It is the response I'm not surprised by it. I'll say that, Rebecca. But I mean, let's be frank. I mean, elections are about choices. And, if President Reed's going to run on his record, we should be informed about his record. And, as he mentioned last night, he has held the top 2 seat in the city of St. Louis for longer than anyone in history, at least according to him. And what do we have to show for it? Seriously. We need to hold our elected officials at every level accountable, especially those who occupy those top seats and can really drive policy. The Board of Aldermen has been under his control for as long as I've been down there, twice as long, in fact. And, it is not exactly a well-oiled machine. We are failing to get real policy through the Board of Aldermen. We've been futzing around with a bill that maybe puts closing the workhouse before the voters. It's nothing more than a large-scale poll, and that's in the president, the author, the author's words himself. This is not reform. This is not the kind of structural change that the city, the region needs us to engage in to move our community forward.
At the end of your ad, you were talking about your plans, that you have a plan to fight crime. And one of these, actually the very first thing, if you look on your platform, is focused deterrence. And it specifically looks at a strategy, you call it a data-driven program that worked in cities across the nation, and it helped Oakland, California drop its homicide rate by 50% in just 6 years. I called some folks in Oakland to get a little bit better clarity on what this program looks like. And also I talked to some officers here in St. Louis. If you could kind of just tell people, without using the word data-driven solution, what this looks like on the ground. Can you paint a picture for what this looks like for everybody from an officer to the police chief? What does that look like?
Sure. And this is a program, Rebecca, I hope maybe you already know this, but one that has been supported by lots of folks. In fact, one of the other woman in the race is also supporting this program. It's one that has been very successful. In fact, it's one of the only programs that has data associated with its success. To paint a picture of how it works, how we have those triangles or rectangles, those areas of focus where we're maybe focusing police,
police efforts, that's a geographical focusing. Focused deterrence can achieve that to be a focus on the very small number of individuals who are at risk for being involved in violence. You can start with folks coming out on parole. You can work with folks that are witnesses themselves or victims of violence. And it puts those folks in a room. It connects them with the resources they need to change their lives. And it's tough when they're not. It's a real focused approach to helping people turn their lives around and making sure that those at really high risk of being involved in violence or have a focus associated with them. Focusing geographically sweeps so many people unnecessarily under the rug. And I can tell you from living in representing one of those areas, the overwhelming majority of people in those areas are law-abiding citizens, and they're just living their normal lives. It's not a very fair or effective approach to focus in a geographical sense.
So I spoke with Heather Taylor, who was formerly a homicide detective here, as many know, was previously the president of Ethical Society Police. The way she explained it was people like Captain Ryan Cousins, who you might know because would have been working in your area, they used focused deterrence here in St. Louis. And what it means is if you see somebody who maybe is a relative to somebody who was shot and they're trying to interrupt crime in that kind of way, they go and they offer some kind of supports, resources, things like that. That's kind of like what it looks like on the ground. But the problem is these officers don't have any resources to offer. That's what your St. Louis officers are saying. You would, in every day of the week, you would have to have some place where you can take drug addicts, even on the weekends. We don't have that here. You'd have to have places that would be able to offer employment. You have to have a full range of network, which St. Louis does not have. So you can say something like, focused deterrence, and it sounds really great, but how are you going to build this entire network that would support something like that?
Sure. And again, like I mentioned, I'm not alone in supporting this initiative. And that's why, even though there are aspects of focused deterrence that are in place right now, we don't have a fully fledged program. The way it will work successfully is if, they're through call-ins. So what you do is you take the folks that I've mentioned before and you call them in with their family and their support network. And you have to coordinate those support systems, Rebecca. That is critical. You have to call them in with those resources available. And this is going to cost money. It's not going to cost nearly as much as the Cure Violence model, but it isn't free. We do have to have those robust systems in place. And we do have to be prepared to connect people successfully into a system that can change their life and help them turn their lives around. But you're absolutely right. We do not have it in place now. We brought in a pilot program in about 2012 where we actually had a real focused approach to it. It has to be comprehensive. It can't be a one-off set of officers who are sort of deploying this on an ad hoc basis and trying to find a resource here and there for people. It has to be a coordinated approach, and that's where the program can be helpful.
So how is it distinguished from Cure Violence? How would you distinguish? How is it distinguished from Cure Violence? How would you distinguish the two?
Yeah, that's a good, if I could just kind of offer something that the Oakland office folks said, what it looks like over there is there's somebody at the police department that has a whiteboard, and they write names on the whiteboard that say these people are at risk of violence. And then they go out and they, bring those people into a round table that includes the district attorney, social services, maybe clergy, and police officers. So it sounds to me kind of like a Cure Violence, but the police doing it. So I just kind of wanted to ask you, we have Cure Violence, so how would this work in correlation with that?
Yes, yeah. So in cities where it's been most successful, there's not a one program approach. So typically Cure Violence and focused deterrence would work together and with one another, and they kind of support one another. Where you're right there, the focused deterrence model does include law enforcement, and then it's broader. It includes the circuit attorney's office, the prosecutors. It includes the service providers that we mentioned. But it's a much broader approach, and there is going to have to be a coordinated system to make it successful. And I really do think that the cure violence model is one that can be very helpful. I am dismayed here in St. Louis when the folks that were pushing for it, the advocates, those folks who wanted it to be successful, walked away from it. And that's a real red flag for me. We have got to reposition that investment, which can be very, very helpful, into one that is supported by the very community that was pushing for it to be funded here.
Can I make the question just a little bit broader, because there's a number of problems that a person running for mayor is going to see, and you have some priorities to think about. But so you've got crime as one. There's probably also the inequalities that exist around the city, and the structural issues that hold people down and hold them away from and holding the city away from coming to its full potential. And the question is, well, what can the mayor do about this? Because political scientists tell us that we have a weak mayor system. We also have a weak Board of Aldermen system too, but that's a different issue. You've already been there. So
strong developers, though.
What can you do?
Say that again, Maureen. I didn't hear you.
I said strong developers, though.
Yes.
They usually win when there's a weak system in place. You're absolutely right. They can easily take advantage. So what can a mayor do to help equalize and make our city a more equitable one? First, we can do the basics of city government right and equitably across the city, and we're failing to do that right now. By that I mean getting back to the purpose of city government. What is the purpose? What is our job here? It's to provide a base level of city services, pick up your trash, that sort of thing. A reasonable expectation of public safety, which is not happening equitably at all in the city of St. Louis right now. Violence is very disproportionately impacting communities of low income and communities of color. And lastly, a real plan for success and economic development strategy, goal, a direction for our community that means that people can have jobs and live successful lives. And we're failing to do that equitably. So when I think about what the mayor can and should be doing to make our city more equitable, I think about the real purpose of city government. And first and foremost, making sure that the trash is picked up equally across the city. And when we don't have enough trash trucks like we have right now to pick up garbage, those deficits, those failures are also spread equitably across the city. So our taxpayers understand that we need to make an investment in trash trucks. And in order to go back to the taxpayers and say, hey, we need some money to bond this out, we have got to have the trust of our citizens. And right now, without providing that base level of a purpose of city government, we're not going to get our taxpayers to agree to give us any more money. So we've got to start maneuvering through that in a way that puts trust first, puts our citizens first, and gets back to the hard work, the basics of city government, Judge.
Will reducing the size of the Board of Aldermen from 28, I guess, to 14, will that help, hurt, neutral? How do you see that? I mean, you know what the function of the alderman is because you are one.
Yeah, well, the function of, I would say the dysfunction of the board, I do think that it will help. And here's why. We are the policy-making body of city government, and it's our job to really hold accountable the other two arms. You think about the trifecta of government. You have the judicial arm, the administrative branch, and the legislative branch. Well, we're the legislative branch, and it's our job to hold at least the administrative part of city government accountable. But when we are mired in city services and we are so on the ground level, directing whether or not you get a speed hump on this block and putting stop signs here and that sort of thing, and replacing dumpsters and taking all these constituent calls, it really prevents that set of individuals from acting in a policy-oriented manner. So I think that if we can reduce the size of the Board of Aldermen, provide a level of staff, of support staff that can help take some of that burden, the administrative burden off of our aldermen, we can reorient that body to be a check and balance on the administrative branch, that branch I'm running to serve in. But I want a Board of Aldermen that's robust, that can help maneuver serious policy issues through and hold accountable my administration if I am to win, so that we can collectively come up with the best solutions for our community as a whole.
It seems like the two, so at least I've been in St. Louis City since 2009. The two things everyone has been talking about ever since 2009 is reducing the number of the Board of Aldermen and city-county reunification. And reducing the number of the board seems, for the moment, like it is really happening. Although I would love to hear your thoughts on if you think that's true and what you think you, if you were to be mayor, should be doing about that, should be doing to help that process, or what your role would be in that. And then city county reunification, you know, comes up every other thought, and yet there seems to have been no tangible progress. Particularly the sort of spectacular failure of the Better Together, the sort of the explosion of the Better Together initiative. So, I mean, what do you think you as mayor would be doing? I mean, first of all, do you support, I mean, personally, do you support both of those sort of big governmental changes? And then what do you think you as mayor would be doing to implement or make those happen or be successful?
Sure. So let's first talk about the reduction of the Board of Aldermen. This was an initiative that was passed by voters in 2012. And what that charter amendment change directs our government to do is to reduce the number of wards from 28 to 14 at the end of this year. Starting at January 1st, 2022, we're supposed to have 14 wards. And guess how many aldermen we're going to have at that time? 28. Is there a plan to get that done? No. And we've seen in St. Louis County the mess that happens when there's an overlap or a strange situation of that nature. It can be disastrous. We have no idea. I mean, who's the chair of the county council right now? That's a question for the courts. The city of St. Louis is absolutely putting itself in danger of being in a very similar situation, because every effort to have a meaningful conversation about how we're going to move through this has been thwarted by the president of the board, because he wants to lord over the redistricting process. And so as mayor, what I will be doing if I am elected is, and even if I'm not, as a member of the Board of Aldermen, really strongly supporting the idea of taking redistricting out of the hands of the Board of Aldermen and putting it instead in the hands of the community, the residents, people who are impacted by those ward boundaries, because we have a disproportionate amount of influence by the ward boundaries, our ward capital, all these things that go through the Board of Aldermen right now really make a big difference in the lived experience of being in St. Louis. So I think it's really important that we eliminate the gerrymandering factor. And we start by looking at smart redistricting that includes taking neighborhoods and keeping them intact, business districts and keeping those intact, and making sure that we have fair and equitable representation. So that's the first question. And I think that is just one of the most important issues facing us. You know, those board boundaries are going to be set for the next 10 years. And, you know, as well as that, we've got to figure out what that year and a half, I mean, we're going to have a year and a half where we have 28 aldermen and 14 wards. What is that going to look like, functionally speaking, for government, for governing? And we've got to work through that. And to me, the most important thing is that those decisions being driven by the public and not those people who want to keep their seats. So I hope we can all engage in that conversation this spring and summer as we're really maneuvering that, because if we fail to really develop a plan, it's just going to be in the hands of the Board of Aldermen. And we really see, we've seen recently how things move through that board. It's not pleasant and it's not constructive. So get engaged on that subject. And I hope the brains here today that I'm seeing, the faces that I'm seeing, and hopefully those that are tuning in can really participate in that conversation. And then your second question is really about the other big structural issue before us, and that is a combination of some kind, or the consideration of a restructuring of the regional government. And I am absolutely in favor of restructuring that. I will freely admit that when the Better Together plan was born, this is before I was an alderman, I think it was about 8 years ago, I was in favor of it. I thought this is great. We've got to re-envision and think big and think bigger than we are to position our broader community for growth. The details, of course, terrified me, in fact, so much so that, I worked my tail off to make sure that, that the sky is falling. But, St. Louis as a region is stagnant. We haven't changed population-wise my entire lifetime. Since I was born in 1978, we're the same size. Meanwhile, Atlanta has more than doubled because they got their act together, and communities that are growing have a unified vision. We're not only getting outperformed by Atlanta and Nashville. In the last 10 years of economic expansion nationally, St. Louis, the region, was outperformed by Columbia, Missouri, Springfield, Missouri. We're getting outperformed by everyone. And this is just unacceptable. We have got to figure out a way to combine in a way to work together in a structural way that unifies a vision towards growth.
You mentioned some other cities, and maybe you want to reflect just on people that maybe you've been in touch with or you've looked at from afar or maybe close in. But who would be your models for doing this kind of work? Because you mentioned some cities that have done well. Are there particular mayors or styles that you think, or programs or approaches to governing because there really, I don't think there's any real new ways of doing things, but you can certainly copy some very successful ways. And what are those models?
I guess when I think of cities that have really been effective, I mentioned Atlanta. Maynard Jackson was the mayor in the late 70s, early 80s out there, and he really helped transform that city from one that was extraordinarily racially divided into one that was united. They developed a motto, I think it was like, we're too busy to hate. And they got the business community reoriented around this idea that if we work together, we can grow. And you know what? It worked. It worked fantastically.
What stopped us from doing that?
Being able to work together. Really, I think we've had, we have been so insular in our thinking, whether it's just city, just county. Look at the way we project around big issues. Airport privatization. The city of St. Louis embarked upon, focused on its economic development strategy over the last 4 years. Not entirely, but pretty significantly, on selling off the biggest asset that we have. The asset, which, by the way, is located in St. Louis County. We never talked to anybody in St. Louis County about it. We never talked to our business community or the people who pay for the airport through user fees. We just said, it's our airport. We'll do what we want with it. And then you can't posture like that about your biggest asset and then turn around and say, okay, now let's work together on other things. It doesn't work that way. And I think that we have taken that approach to so many things, not just the city. The city's not alone in blame here. Our surrounding areas have approached it in a similar way. And until we can start working together constructively and understand that until we do so, we're going to continue to sputter, to stagnate. And we are sputtering right out of relevance in a broader scope of things, nationally and certainly internationally.
So I saw some preliminary numbers. I think there's some, talking about redistricting, I think there's some question about when we're going to have final census numbers. But I saw an article with preliminary census numbers. And the thrust of what I understood it to say was that there is continued population loss in the city, and that almost all of that population loss is due to Black families leaving the city. Do you think that's a problem? And what, if so, are you planning to do to stop that flow and to make people, especially Black families, feel more supported and cared for and resourced here in the city of St. Louis?
It's a huge problem. The major cities that are most cities that are growing in the United States right now are growing in their populations of people of color, period. So if we want to be a growing community, we have to grow that population. We're not going to be an anomaly here. So it is extremely important. I think one of the biggest issues really I look at North St. Louis in particular, and you see, I'm interested in elections right now. I'm running for office, and I have seen the voter turnout in North St. Louis fall off a cliff. And that's, to me, an indicator of the population loss. And, I think when, in talking to families across our city, it's violence, it's crime, it's disinvestment, it's vacancy, it's these big issues. And, that's why, I put some real thought and time into developing a real strategy for addressing violence, looking at what other cities are doing. And I'm extremely committed to dealing with vacancy and rebuilding our neighborhoods. Not by tearing them down, but by growing our population. We have got to turn around the narrative of St. Louis as a whole. And, I currently represent a very, very diverse part of our city. I'd argue the most diverse ward maybe in the city of St. Louis. And we have it's almost a microcosm of St. Louis. And I find that in order to best serve the community I currently represent, I have to listen to them. I have to listen to people and the concerns. And that's where, I think many people don't feel heard by the city government right now.
Well, one of the things that you can look at, I suppose, is what are the things that cause people to move in? What can you do to make people want to move into the city? I mean,
Yeah.
that one of the things that the mayor doesn't have anything directly to do with, but schools are an issue for a lot of young people with children. Crime, we've already been talking about crime a lot, but there's a number of other things, city services, just that, what are, that you're talking about people moving, and have you thought about, well, why are people moving out? And as I understand it, the loss of population in the last 10 years has largely been African American. So we're bringing some people in, but we're also losing a lot of people. And I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, specifically, do you want to, it was a little glitchy for a second.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about education or?
Well, just any of the kinds of things that cause people to want to come and make their life in the city. What will bring people into the city? And have we figured out why it is that people are leaving the city? And I just mentioned education just as one piece of that, because we have been talking about crime.
I think education is a piece, and I think that crime is absolutely a piece. I mean, those two things are enormously impactful. I also know that, for families who own their homes, I've lost several residents here in the 20th ward who, had a major structural issue, for example, a roof that needed to be fixed, and they couldn't get equity out of their homes to refinance it from a bank to fix those major structural issues because of the continued redlining that's still very much happening in the city of St. Louis right now, and it has for the last decades. So we have to get serious about our banking community and making access to capital something that our residents across the city can get. I'm committed to doing some of that work with our banking community to break down the absolute red lines. I'm very encouraged with the Green Lining Fund. And that the city is participating in that. We have to expand it. I think making sure that our city employees have access to the capital, underwriting loans, for example, to be homeowners and have long-term investments in our city. The education piece is so big. So many people are leaving because of a lack of special education, for example. That piece is so big. It's estimated that something around 30% of our school kids have needs beyond traditional education, and with failing to really provide special education access here, families are leaving.
The school board is in charge of things now. The mayor doesn't have a lot to do with that, but I mean, the question is, well, what can the mayor do to help the situation? Because the elected school board is now back in charge of the schools, and then you've got charter schools that have taken up quite a bit of the capacity of the school system, if you want to call it a system. Fewer parochial schools in the city. So the charter schools have sort of come in and interlace themselves into that. So, how do you see all that fitting together, and what can the mayor do to help or foster the kind of thing you're talking about?
So the charter schools are siphoning off some of our kids, but we've also seen this huge population loss that you were talking about, Judge. So we have to address that. We have to empower that school board that you were talking about and the superintendent that they hire, that they trust to lead the St. Louis public schools. Our SLPS kids are still the most numerous. We have about 20,000 of them right now. They make up a little more than half of our overall kids. And so I think it's important that the next mayor take a real education approach that focuses on and prioritizes our SLPS kids for that reason, that they're the most, and they are most often those most vulnerable. While many of our kids are growing up and going to, really successful schools, they leave our region for forever after they graduate. And our SLPS kids are overwhelmingly St. Louisans for life.
One of the things the city does is that the city grants tax breaks to developers, and then and also to not-for-profit institutions like Washington University, St. Louis University, the hospitals, and so forth. That takes a lot of property off the tax rolls. That has an impact, a huge impact on the schools. For the money, you need money to do schools.
Yeah. So going back to that SLPS, issue, it's important that Dr. Adams and the elected school board have a real driving voice in what happens. So if I'm elected mayor, I'll bring in a member of the cabinet who's committed to education and youth issues. It can help us look at, through all policy issues through that lens, including that tax abatement piece. And giving those folks from our, the education stakeholders a real voice in how we do issue those tax abatements is so important. Right now we're vetting those through our SLDC, our St. Louis Development Corporation, which funds itself with the developer fees. It's a real inverse in orientation of the incentive of itself. So we've got to have that voice of the impacted at the table when we're vetting the incentives to begin with, and that's where having a more constructive voice there. But being led by SLPS, Dr. Adams, and the elected school board is key here, and that's where I am committed to having a moratorium on the opening of new schools until we can fully flush out what the education system can and should look like for our city. It's really easy to say no more school closures. We're just going to have a moratorium on school closures, but that's not the answer either. Believe it or not, the city, SLPS has around, as I mentioned, 20,000 kids. So does Parkway. And Parkway has 19 elementary schools. SLPS has 46. We're spending an enormous amount of money on buildings. And that money may be better spent educating our kids. We have to think outside the box, and we have to be realistic, and we have to put our kids first in these conversations. And they're not always clear cut. The answer isn't always black and white, but leaning into those folks who know education best is going to be the best path through this.
So you mentioned adding a member of your cabinet that's going to be focused on children and youth. What other mayoral appointees would you be willing to share with us that you've thought about or you've made some decisions about? I mean, are there folks that you're willing to say, day one, I would ask this person to no longer serve in their role? Or is there anyone else that you're willing to sort of say, I've really thought about it and this is the person I would like to ask to step in here?
And you're asking for specifics, and I'm not going to get into specific individuals. I don't know that would be wise at this moment. But I can say that I do think it's very important that we have an appointee of the police department that oversees and is committed to equity within our police department that can help drive some of the policy changes to, for example, with use of force, with hiring, with promotion, so that we have that voice in the police department that also is serving in a public safety role within the mayor's office. So I think that's a very important piece, and I'm going to be making sure that the development piece is pulled into the mayor's office, so that when we're, Otis Williams, the director of SLDC, is retiring this year, and that board is going to be selecting a new leader. Believe it or not, much like the school board, the mayor doesn't get to choose that. Currently, the way SLDC is oriented, it's a quasi-governmental entity. It's outside of the city. We can't even direct them to share their finances the way we want them. They're a nonprofit, and I think there's a real cause for reconsidering that construct so that the buck can stop in a different place, and we can drive how that the economic development in an overall sense is driven for the city.
Do you mind if we jump into the jail situation?
Yeah, jump in. Yeah.
Okay, great. So obviously you're going to be inheriting a pretty big challenge if you are elected mayor with the current situation with the Justice Center and the workhouse. Yeah, what do you see as your role? Where are you going to put your might?
First and foremost, I mean, what's happened at CJC, what's come to light in the last couple of weeks is just, it's mind-blowing. I think at the crux of this discussion, we have to remember that the folks involved here, they're awaiting trial. None of those folks have been convicted, and our employees, we have a real responsibility to ensure the safety and the well-being and the health of the folks that are incarcerated and the folks that we employ to keep them safe and keep the incarceration facilities running. On the onset, I mean, Rebecca, we have 2 jail facilities. It's very unusual for a city of our size. It's very unusual in general for a city. And I am committed to closing the workhouse. I remain committed to doing that. But it's clear that we have much bigger issues to deal with. And so we're going to have to take a top to bottom approach to really understanding what's going on through both the CJC and the workhouse so that we can, I mean, there clearly needs to be an overhaul of the whole entire system.
Would the public safety director be an appointee position that you would look at?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I was truly horrified to hear that the locks weren't working, that we have known that for some time. Judge Wolf, I admire her willingness to kind of step in and try to help oversee that committee. I freely admit, coming in to be mayor and having to do that is going to be a very, very messy situation, one for which there's not going to be easy answers. But I hope that through relations.
We lost you.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
You're back.
He's coming back. You're back.
You're back.
I tried to say no. I think I accidentally said yes, so then I had to hang up. But my apologies there. It's going to be very messy. But, I think taking the approach that, look, the buck stops with the administration. And yes, it's not going to be an overnight solution, but we have to fix this. And the activist community, the advocacy community, we're all going to have to be at the table here to figure out the way through this, because at the end of the day, one of the most important aspects of reforming this is going to be rebuilding trust.
Rebecca, did you?
Sure. I mean, I guess just in general, you alluded to this too, Judge Wolf, but and I feel like this is just Groundhog Day with these mayoral forums. I feel like I just did this question last year. I mean, for mayoral forum, but we have a dividing line. We have the Del Mar Boulevard, where you go north above Del Mar, and it looks like a completely different country. It's bombed out. It's incredible that this is in our city, and there's been nothing done for this to make it be more equitable. Just visually, it's incredible. You can say there's inequities. It's visible. You can just go walk across the street and see it. Can you give me like some actual pinpoints, things that you've seen over the past time in your board of aldermen that you think have been successful, that have been unsuccessful, that we think go that path, something other than just like we need to address inequities. What are some concrete ways that you think we can really move forward?
Yeah, Paul McKee. Let's start there. The fact that he has been allowed to accumulate properties for decades and let them decay without even being charged building code violations is abhorrent. When I learned that, I put it in an ordinance and got it passed to start charging him finally after over a decade building code violations, holding his feet to the fire. Now, we're talking about $1 million a year. It's a large amount of money. I could be a little off on that figure. But the reality is it's a large amount of money. And we're charging people every day in our neighborhoods for their, garage falling off or, falling down and having little violations. Of course, the largest landholders, those folks that are parking their assets, their money in our city and letting it decay, need to be held accountable. The city is a large landholder, absolutely. And holding ourselves accountable to that is important as well. Some of the ways that as an alderman, I don't have the authority that I'd like to, but putting in place the mow to own program so that if you live next to one of these city-owned vacant lots, you can own it if you simply mow it. And being willing to divest of some of these LRA, land reutilization, city-owned vacant parcels, is a key to it. Breaking down the barriers so that our everyday citizens can just gain an asset rather than having them just be deficits on the city of St. Louis. So, Rebecca, I agree with you. North St. Louis is an entirely different city than what we have, in other, compared to the rest of St. Louis. And being committed to breaking down how we deliver city services, pick up trash, and stop illegal dumping, and being responsive on that very basic level is a key piece to it. And like I said, holding those big landholders accountable has got to be taken to a higher level.
Speaking of holding bigger landowners accountable, would you be in support of negotiating pilots or payments in lieu of taxes from Washington University and St. Louis University?
I would be interested in looking at that. Maureen, your handle just came up here. Local woman. Sorry, it just made me giggle.
My only real contribution to this podcast.
Local woman. I love it. So looking at pilots for Washington University, look, I have to say I am pretty impressed with Washington University reorienting themselves. The recent announcement that local families, if you make under $75,000 a year and can get admitted to the university, can go for free. This would have been a game changer for me. My first year at university, I got a Pell Grant, I didn't even apply to Washington University because it was outside of my lived experience, what I could afford to do. So I do think that they are coming to the table, recognizing that they're a local partner here. And I think those discussions are very much on the table, and I look forward to moving through that. All right, who's playing?
I know. Oh yeah. I've got a ticking time clock of a young
baby.
Yeah.
I got a baby. I got a baby staring at me right now.
Why don't you get one more fire at me?
So and this may be a good closing question. I don't know other people's times. So say you are elected in 4 years, how are you going to measure if you were a success or a failure?
How I'll measure success is looking at the crime rates in St. Louis and looking at our population and looking at the trust that our community has for our law enforcement community, and and having those citizen service requests be distributed equitably, and having our citizens turn around the trust in city government.
Well, I guess I would have one more question. I'm not sure if this is a very good closer, but I know you just mentioned crime, so I just wanted to look at this.
We're getting a baby for the last few minutes.
A resident of St. Louis, but not a voter yet.
This is speaking of a key constituency here,
Actually a native of St. Louis, right? Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You can promise him the seat on your cabinet as the youth representative here. No, I'm just kidding. Rebecca, go ahead.
Likely to poop in it, but
Yeah. Only make more of them than other people.
We've had a lot of that.
I would measure success if no one craps in the mayor's office in 4 years. If that would be success.
Well, no one can promise that, but all right, Rebecca, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, basically, just it's been over 6 years since Ferguson. There's been a lot asked about for police accountability, and pretty much very little is advanced. I mean, I think we had a small advance this past summer to do things like no chokeholds, which were already banned for 10 years anyway. So very symbolic gestures in those 6 years. What is your platform, I guess, for police accountability? What do you think that you can do in your first 100 days, even to do more than anybody's done since Ferguson to move these measures, or reimagining public safety is what I guess the new terminology is, reimagining public safety?
Absolutely. I mean, policing has to be rooted in trust. I mean, I think that we need, that is key here. So I mentioned earlier the use of force policies, the fact that the city of St. Louis is #1 in the nation for police-involved homicides has got to be recognized and has got to be rectified. So reorienting our use of force policy to clearly articulate a commitment to the reverence of life is something that we should absolutely be doing right off the bat. Being committed to transparency in the investigations, taking them out of the police department, whether that's through the Ferguson Commission or recommended, state authority, or if it's through the circuit attorney's office, we need to have a third party there, and we need to mandate transparency in those use of force investigations. By that, I mean putting them in a database and making that data available to the public. The collection of police encounters needs to be something that has some transparency associated with it as well, and we need to be willing to prosecute excessive force. So reorienting that and getting us out of that top seat for that horrible statistic would be another measure of success I would add to it, but it's something that we can start to reorient right off the bat.
When you mentioned about when you were talking about the workhouse and the jail and the various crime issues and so forth, it seems to me that there's the jail, which, by the way, looks very much like the county jail. In fact, they might have even been designed by the same person. But they have a structural flaw, and that is that you can't go outside if you're in jail. And they're designed, I think, just for holding people prior to trial for a relatively short period of time. But we have people living inside those places for 1 year, 2 years, where there really isn't anything going on other than to just be in a jail cell and adjacent areas. And so it seems to me that there's a longer term kind of thing. The other thing I would also mention is that there seems to be really, this may sound odd, but it's a kind of a lack of respectful treatment of people who are in the criminal justice system. I mean, we kind of stick them in jail or stick them in the workhouse and do that. I would commend, by the way, anybody who's interested to go down and see what Doug Burris is doing in the St. Louis County Justice Center. They're doing some programming. They're trying to engage people's minds who are in the jail, and he calls them residents. I don't know what I guess in the city the name is detainees. They're not inmates in the sense that they haven't been convicted, but they are our fellow citizens, and they are going to be back out on the street. In fact, there's a certain amount of working with the courts to see that we're holding on to the right people pre-trial. We haven't had any real jury trials, very many, for about the last year, and so I think that's backed up the system. But there are some things that really need to be addressed, and I don't know if you have some response or some plan, some thinking about that you could share with us.
Well, I would love to accept an invitation to come and see what Mr. Burris is doing in St. Louis County. And Judge, I have to be honest, I really hadn't thought about the fact that folks aren't even allowed to go outside. You know, I volunteered at the Juvenile Detention Center down on Enright for the better part of a decade doing math tutoring, and I ran a garden club there for many summers, many years. And there was an outside start there, and it made a huge difference just to be able to go outside and experience the world, the big world outside of the cells that people are held in. You know, I think that's something that we need to be thinking about, the human side. I mean, just to be reminded that folks that are held in our incarceration facilities are our neighbors, they're our residents, and many of them are never convicted. You know, they're held awaiting a trial that acquits them. So we have to reorient that conversation in one that's constructive. And if you could help arrange a meeting with Mr. Burris, I would certainly look forward to doing that.
Got it.
Well, thank you so much, Cara. Thanks for being with us. I hope you had.
Indeed.
What kind of drink did you have, by the way?
You know, I was just going to say that, you know, I have participated in so many of these forums. In fact, this is the third today. But this is the first one that I've ever participated in where I had a cocktail during the forum, and it was delicious. It was a little bit of, it was bourbon, lemon,
Peach schnapps, lemon, yeah. Peach liqueur.
It was fantastic. And so I really appreciate the conversation with you all. You all are people that I greatly admire, and I appreciate the tough questions, and hopefully we can continue some of this dialogue no matter who wins this mayor's race, and dig into the redistricting, the combination of efforts, and certainly what happens to our jail facilities.
And Steve Smith, thank you for
Thank you so much.
delivering us. What I have here in my hand is a park logger from Tower Grove, for the Tower Grove Park Association, that Steve delivered to my house today. So keeping it local, Steve.
I'd like to thank Bill for keeping this all technically working.
My sincere apologies for overextending the bandwidth here. I just insisted on coming here in person, and I was warned about this, and I was just insistent. So I'll take full responsibility for that.
All righty.
It's great to see you. Great to see you all.
Yeah. Have a good night. Take care.
All right. Good night.
Everybody. Thanks.
Cheers.